Putin is continuing to advance into Korea.
When did we beat Japan at anything?
Is dispersed with 30 bullets within half a second. 30 magazine clip in half a second.
Right now, if you Google the word idiot, a picture of Donald Trump comes up. I just did that.
We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Political Circus Weekly podcast. I am your host, Mike Ursery, and you are listening to episode number 36. Well, I hope everyone had a very happy Independence Day. And as you listen to this podcast, I hope you are still enjoying the 4th of July weekend. I hope everyone got to watch great fireworks displays. I hope everyone got to shoot off some fireworks. I hope you all enjoyed great barbecue. If you drank, I hope you did it responsibly, but I also hope that you enjoyed it. I just hope everyone had a great weekend. A lot of, this is a time of the year, a lot of reflection, a lot of looking back on, we complain a lot in this country, complain about a lot of things, but you still have to appreciate what we have here, what we do have here in America. Appreciate it. Yes, it can be improved. And yes, in many ways, it does seem like the freedom that our forefathers fought for, in ways it does seem restricted, but still, America is the greatest country on earth. I know I'm certainly happy to say that I live here. But enough about that. This week's episode is not about Independence Day. Instead, this is about what happened over the past week. Well, first of all, let me get into that Independence Day parade that took place in Washington, D.C. A lot of people were calling it the Trump parade. I didn't watch the parade myself. I saw plenty of takes about it, but the main focal point of this parade was the speech that President Trump gave. And there was one excerpt from this speech, and this is, now later on he blamed it on the rain. I guess he said it was hard to see the teleprompter in the rain, but still I don't know how you get the word airport from this, but he was talking about the American Revolution, and one part he said they rammed the ramparts, they took the airports, they did everything they had to do. They took the airports during the American Revolution when airports did not exist. They took the airports. And there have been plenty of memes since then, plenty of jokes. Someone actually edited the Wikipedia page about George Washington crossing the Delaware. I don't know if it's still like that, but it was at one point. Someone edited that page, and they said that action was the first move in a surprise attack, talking about Washington crossing the Delaware at Christmas, in a surprise attack against the German Hessian Allied mercenary forces at Philadelphia International Airport in the Battle of Terminal F Food Court on the morning of December 26th. Washington and his men captured runways 27 left, 27 right, parts of Terminal F, including the food court, baggage claim, and some bathrooms. Oh, this is great. This is just absolutely great. And, he also mixed up history of the American Revolution and the War of 1812. Because when he said they rammed the ramparts, and then somewhere in there he said the American flag still waved defiantly or something along those lines. Yeah, he was talking about Fort McHenry, and that was actually the War of 1812. That was not the American Revolution. So whoever was the speechwriter who wrote that is a giant fill. And that person should probably never write a speech ever again. That was bad. Oh, that was so bad. President of the United States getting American history completely wrong. Amazing. So you had that going on. And luckily for the mainstream media, they were able to complain about that, and they were able to deflect from tactics from the extreme far left over the past week. So one of those tactics was doxing, and you might be familiar with a child who was on the internet, Ava Martinez, who known on the internet as Mini AOC. She's a 10-year-old girl who looks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she would post on social media pictures of her mocking AOC. Like there was one, like you probably saw the pictures of AOC in front of that immigration detention center where she's just like looking at it, crying. It looks like she's breaking down, looking all emotional. Mini AOC put up a similar post, but it was about something like the face you make when you find out the park is closed or something like that. It's her standing in front of a fence at a park pretending to be crying. It was actually pretty funny. So she was doxxed. Well, she and her family were doxxed. And she and her family were being harassed and receiving death threats. And her family announced that they had been doxxed. And they also said that all of her social media accounts have been deleted and she will no longer post content on the internet. And this is allegedly from people who support Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So, yes, they have a problem with a 10-year-old girl mocking a sitting congressperson, but they have absolutely no problem with a 10-year-old boy dressing up like a girl and dancing for gay men in gay bars. Yeah, I'm going to try to talk about the logic of the far left in this episode, but I kind of don't want to because it just makes absolutely no sense. So the other thing from the extreme far left this past week, there is a journalist who works for a news website called Quillette, who was attacked and beaten by Antifa, the extreme far left group, who call themselves anti-fascist, but they are actually quite very fascist. And this happened at a rally in Portland. This was on June 29th. It was last Saturday. So Andy Ngo is covering a Proud Boys rally that took place in Portland that day. Members of Antifa showed up to stage a counter protest. And Ngo was there. He was in the crowd. He was filming because he had a GoPro. And he was filming everything that was taking place. He was documenting everything that was taking place during that rally. In other words, he was doing his job. He was there to cover the Proud Boys rally. And of course, if a counter protest shows up and you're a journalist covering the rally, of course you're going to cover the counter protest because why wouldn't you? So he's there doing his job. And at one point, people of Antifa saw him and they began like taunting him. They're yelling at him. They're cussing at him. At one point, like there's a video of all this, and at one point you hear someone say, "F you, Andy Ngo." Then they began throwing milkshakes at him, and they did this while his back was turned because they're so brave and so courageous to throw something at someone while their back is turned to them. And then this eventually escalated. It escalated into them pushing him around. Now you look at this, he's actually trying to walk away. He's not resisting. He's not trying to counter their attacks in any way. And he doesn't try to fight back. He's vastly outnumbered, and he had to have known that any counteraction would cause the situation to escalate anymore. And I say he had to have known, because I don't know exactly what he was thinking at that point in time. But this escalated even more. They began throwing punches. He falls to the ground. They continue to punch him, and they start kicking him. They stole his GoPro. Yes, they stole his personal property that he was using to film the rally and the counter-protest. And it was only after they had left that Portland police showed up to offer assistance. Now, any rally that takes place in a public place, there will be police on scene to maintain order in case anything does get crazy like it did in Portland. But they did not intervene while this was going on. They didn't actually go to him until after it was all over. Why they didn't try to intervene, I don't really know. Now, I'm not blaming Portland police for what happened here, but them stepping in and defusing that situation could have prevented him from being attacked, him from being assaulted. You see the effects, like the pictures after the fact, and his face is badly bruised. He had two black eyes, and it was also reported later that he was taken to the emergency room and he had a brain hemorrhage from what they did to him. Yeah, I'm not blaming Portland police for what happened, but I still hold them to a fault because they did not step in. So, yeah, extreme far leftist attacking a journalist. And now there are some people who will try to say, some people have tried to say that he's not a journalist at all. And of course, these are people on the left who are saying this because they're trying to either justify or excuse what these people did to him. They're saying that he's not a journalist at all, or they're saying that he is a conservative journalist who writes for a right-wing news site. Now, Quillette, if you're not familiar with it, they are not right-wing. If you look at their About section, they describe themselves as an online magazine that calls itself a platform for free thought. Now, just because they are a platform for free thought, that does not mean that they are right-wing. It just means that they are journalists who have a mind of their own, show no bias, and they also want to encourage their readers to have minds of their own. That does not make them right-wing, though some will try to tell you otherwise. And Ngo has also done work in the past for the Wall Street Journal, and he's done work in the past for the New York Post. So Andy Ngo is a journalist. Now, this is not the first time that we have seen Antifa do things like this. We've seen in the past before. We've seen video footage, some of it from Andy Ngo, some of it from other people, of these violent punks. They're destroying property, ravaging businesses, they're attacking other people. There's a video that made the rounds of Antifa attacking an old man. He's on the ground, they're beating him with a crowbar, and they're spraying mace in his face. Now, as to how that thing started, I have seen conflicting reports on that in the past. I've seen one that they just attacked him for no reason. I've also seen that he went up to them looking for a fight and they gave him one. So I don't know exactly how that started, but there's video on the internet of these Antifa creeps beating up an old man with a crowbar. Yeah, so that happened. Now you have these Antifa people who are running around without accountability. They try to put fear in their opponents. They certainly tried to put fear in Andy Ngo by doing what they did to him. And him suffering this brain hemorrhage, his life may be forever changed because of that. And that's a real shame because, one, he did nothing wrong. And two, he is a talented, objective, attention to detail journalist. So what's worse than, now, I wouldn't say it's worse, but it's still, the people who are doing this are no better than the people who actually did the beating. The people who are trying to justify this are no better. The response went about how you would imagine, given the way that things are right now. You have millions of people who demanded justice and accountability for this while condemning the attack. However, you also had a lot of people on the left defending Antifa's actions and making this out to be like it was Andy's fault. One of those people was a woman named Charlotte Clymer, who, according to her Twitter bio, she is the press secretary for Human Rights Campaign, which is an LGBTQ advocacy group. And that same day, she tweeted out, yes, she actually said this, she tweeted out, Andy Ngo intentionally provokes people on the left to drive his content. Being attacked today on video taken by an actual journalist, because Ngo is definitely not, is the greatest thing that could have happened to his career. You know it, I know it, he knows it, we all know it. Violence is completely wrong, and I find it sad and weak to allow a sniveling weasel like Andy Ngo to get under one's skin like this. But I'm also not going to pretend this wasn't Ngo's goal from the start. Yes, because getting beat to the point that you have a brain hemorrhage is going to further your career. And provoking people to beat you the way that these people beat Andy Ngo, that's somehow going to further Andy's career. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to try to get into logic here because I just can't. But anyway, according to Clymer, this was all Andy's fault. He not only wanted to get attacked, but he provoked it. And he provoked it by walking around and documenting what he saw. In other words, doing his job. Clymer makes this seem like he was all up in people's faces and baiting them into altercations, and that wasn't the case. There are eyewitnesses who could tell you that he was not in people's faces. He was simply just walking around with his GoPro and just filming everything that was happening. I find Clymer's statement to be completely ironic to the highest degree. For one thing, Clymer's job is media relations, meaning she works with journalists on a regular basis, and you would think that someone who works in media like this is going to show solidarity with a journalist and not sympathize with a journalist's attackers. But that's what she did here. And another thing that makes this so ironic, Andy Ngo is gay. He is a gay person of color because he's Asian American. He is exactly the kind of person that Human Rights Campaign is supposed to advocate for. But no, instead, their spokesperson calls him a fraud and says he deserved what he got, while also saying that she does not support violence. Just amazing. Oh, and another thing, too. This happened during Pride Month. June, as we all know, is Pride Month, and this happened during the month of June. No, you cannot make this up. This is, wow. So Clymer is not the only person to have a take like this, though given her position with her organization certainly is alarming. Others accuse Ngo of being a fascist, being a conservative, being a member of the alt-right. Well, Andy Ngo is none of those things. And in addition, people were calling the publication he works for, Quillette, a conservative news website. The editor-in-chief of Quillette, Claire Lehman, had to put out a statement saying that no, Quillette is not a conservative website. We are all political moderates of a liberal centrist persuasion, was what she tweeted out. And she tweeted this in response to a Snopes article, the website supposedly run by fact checkers. Yes, a fact-checking website called Quillette a conservative news website and got it completely wrong. So, again, just amazing. And throughout the day that it happened, and even afterwards, we saw even more of these takes. with many of them coming from left-wing journalists. They slandered Ngo's name, and they discredited his work. C.J. Werleman, who is a journalist at Middle East Eye, a publication I never heard of until I started researching for this episode, he said that Ngo is one of the leading amplifiers of Islamophobia and also participated in white supremacist instigated violence. Now, he later walked back that statement, but he still said that Ngo has participated in white supremacist rallies, and his proof of that is that Ngo once posted the location of a Proud Boys rally with the intention of covering it. In other words, he was doing his job as a journalist covering a rally. Yes, a so-called journalist actually said that. So even though you are a journalist who is assigned to cover a rally and all you're doing is covering it, if it is a far-right, alt-right, whatever, be it Proud Boys, Unite the Right, whatever kind of rally that may be, even if you're just there covering it, you are still somehow participating in it. Again, I'm not going to try to jump into logic here because there's no point. Even more takes from journalists came out that day or even afterwards, especially at prominent publications like the Huffington Post, the Guardian, the Independent. Noah Berlatsky, who is a Twitter verified journalist. Yep, it's always, you ever notice it's always the blue check marks who just say completely dumb things? Anyway, Noah Berlatsky is a Twitter verified journalist for Pacific Standard, another publication I never heard of until I started doing research for this, said that calling Ngo a journalist is inaccurate and only gives fascists a propaganda victory. No, I'm not going to. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Another journalist, Zach Beauchamp, who is a writer at Vox. Yes. Oh, gosh. It seems like Vox always has the best takes. And by best, I mean the worst. Anyway, Zach Beauchamp wrote this article for Vox, and it was titled, "The Assault on Conservative Journalist Andy Ngo Explained." And in this article, he describes Quillette as a major hub of the intellectual dark web. And in this piece, he says that Quillette is a loose collection. Yes, a news publication is actually a loose collection of anti-political correctness, anti-identity politics, anti-left media figures, and reporters. He said that Ngo is the closest thing the intellectual dark web has to a gonzo journalist, someone who goes into allegedly hostile places and documents them for his more than 200,000 Twitter followers to illustrate that the intellectual dark web is right about the threat from multiculturalism and the left. He continues on. Last year, for example, Ngo went to the UK to chronicle the supposed threat the rising Muslim population posed to British society. The resulting article, A Visit to Islamic England, claimed England was being quietly conquered by fundamentalist Islam. Wow. So you report on something taking place in the UK, and you report on a perspective that is opposite of what the left would report, and somehow that makes you a part of the intellectual dark web. And if you are anti-political correctness, anti-identity politics, anti-left media, that makes you a part of the intellectual dark web. Okay. I'm not going to question it. Because once again, there's no point. Now, here's one take that really stuck out to me, though. And this is from Noah Smith, who is an opinion writer at Bloomberg, another prominent publication. He tweeted out this thread about what had happened to Andy. And I'm not going to go through the entire thread. I just want to talk about the first and the last tweets of the thread because that says everything about how people on the left feel about this. So here's his first tweet. So, like many people, I criticized Antifa for beating up right-wing provocateur Andy Ngo. Vigilante assaults are unacceptable, but it's important to keep this incident in perspective. It is not a manifestation of rampant leftist violence in America. And then here's the last tweet. So after you criticize Antifa for beating up Andy Ngo, remember to keep things in perspective. Overall, leftists are not the political extremists who are threatening public order and security in America in 2019. So in other words, what Antifa did to Andy is very bad, but still stay on message, stick with the narrative that no, we are not the enemies. It is actually people on the right who are the enemies. They are the political extremists who are threatening public order and security in America in 2019. Stay on message. Never get off message. Even when people on your own side, people on the left, are actually assaulting people and being violent and destroying property and ravaging businesses and all these things, still stay on message. So there you have it. What Antifa is bad, or what Antifa did is bad, and they should be condemned. But don't let that shield you from the real threat in America, which is people on the right. So it's already been established that Quillette is not a conservative publication. Just like it's established that Andy Ngo is not a conservative journalist, a member of the alt-right, or a white supremacist. But to understand why people are saying this, you have to try to understand the thought process of people on the radical left. People on the fringes of the far left who champion themselves as social justice warriors are intolerant in every sense of the word. They oppose any thought that is different from what they believe. You also have to consider what they deem the right. Now, the reason why they are saying that Quillette is a conservative publication and why they're calling Andy Ngo a conservative journalist, to them, the right is anyone. It's not just anyone who sits right of center on the political spectrum. No, the right to them is anyone who is to the right of them on the spectrum. If you're a centrist, they consider you on the right. If you're a moderate that is left of center, they consider you to be on the right. They are authoritarians who use identity politics to justify their violence, and they justify violence against anyone who is to the right of them. Take, for example, the thing that started back in 2016, Punch a Nazi, when you had people on the extreme far left actually advocated punching people in the face and justified it by saying that they are Nazis. You even had people justifying their own actions by saying, I only punch Nazis. But how do you define Nazi? Look, unless these people are building time machines and using them to travel back to 1930s Germany so they can duke it out with brown shirts, they're not punching Nazis. Maybe far-right extremists, but far-right extremists are not Nazis. Nazi has become another buzzword that has totally lost its meaning, just like the word conservative. That phrase, anyway, I only punch Nazis, is irresponsible because the meaning of the word can be bent and they can label anyone they wish to punch a Nazi. The guy wearing a MAGA hat and who openly supports Donald Trump, that doesn't make him a Nazi, but they'll say he's a Nazi because they want to hurt him. The elderly woman who waves an American flag and supports the troops, Again, not a Nazi, but that won't stop them from calling her one. This is something that's been going on for a while, and people have done little about it. Antifa has gone on unchecked, and that means that they've only continued with their actions. And, seeing them destroy property and assault innocent people in the streets without repercussion only emboldens them to continue. They're just going to keep on doing this until they are put in check, until they start suffering severe consequences for what they're doing. They're just going to keep doing this. It's gotten to the point where they actually attack a journalist. At a time where people are saying that it's a dangerous time to be a journalist, it's now gotten to the point where Antifa are attacking journalists. So maybe they were right. Maybe it really is a dangerous time to be a journalist in America because of people like Antifa. Gee, I didn't know they were talking about themselves this whole time. I thought they were talking about the other side. I guess we were all wrong. Anyway, so to make things worse, you have people arguing over who is actually to blame for that happening. It's like, are we really going to, do we really have to have a discussion or even an argument where we decide if we blame the aggressor or the victim? Are we really doing this? Whenever a woman is sexually assaulted, people know better than to say something like it happened because, or maybe it happened because of the way she was dressed, or because of where she went, or because she went there alone, or who was she hanging out with, or we don't sit there and have a discussion about, oh, well, she put herself in this situation because of whatever. No, we blame the aggressor for that. So why is this any different? And what impact could this have on other journalists? Journalists who are not on the far left. Will they continue to cover Antifa? Will they continue to report on crimes committed by this far left group? Or are they going to stay away out of fear of retaliation? And another thing too, this latest trend with the left, throwing milkshakes at people. You even have left-wing journalists like Carlos Maza encouraging this. Whenever he put out that tweet that said, milkshake them all, talking about quote-unquote fascist. People will look at this, or people might look at this, and they might say something like, well, it's just a milkshake. You have to be a real snowflake to think hitting someone with a milkshake is an act of violence. Well, no. Simply throwing a milkshake isn't necessarily violent. It's extremely childish, but a simple act of throwing just a milkshake is not violent. But what happens when it escalates beyond just a milkshake? The Portland police had said on the day of Andy's attack that they received a tip that people were putting quick-drying cement in their milkshakes. Well, that was never confirmed, but think about that. Quick-drying cement is not supposed to touch a person's skin. No, that can badly damage your skin. Putting something dangerous in a milkshake means it's no longer just a milkshake. What's going to happen when people actually do start putting things in milkshakes, like rocks, or pieces of concrete, or nails, or tacks, or razor blades? Are you seeing the problem with this now? I really hope Andy Ngo can recover from his injuries, and I hope he can return to the field to do his work. He was interviewed on CNN this past week, and his face still severely bruised from being beaten. And, you could really see the effects of him suffering a brain hemorrhage because he spoke slowly, he struggled to form certain words, and he was struggling to finish sentences. However, he still went on national TV to tell his account of what happened, and I commend him for that. To me, it's a sign that he is not going to back down. He is not going to be intimidated. And what happened to Andy, this needs to be condemned by everyone. To say you condemn violence, but you follow that with the word but, as if to say, I condemn violence, or yes, I condemn violence, but to say that means you don't actually condemn violence. You actually favor violence against anyone you disagree with. And that is the biggest problem in our country today. In America, you have people who view dissent as a cardinal sin. You know, to disagree with someone, all that means is that someone else doesn't have the same opinion as you. And that's okay. It is okay to not have the same opinion. It is okay to have disagreements. It happens all the time. But why is it that when it comes to politics, people seem to act like it's not okay to disagree? It's not okay to have a different opinion. Why is that? Disagreements. The thing with disagreements is that they should encourage discussion. That's an opportunity for you to get to know the person that you don't agree with. Talk to them. Try to understand why they don't hold the same opinion as you on something. America has become so tribal to the point where Americans of different tribes, different opinions, they try so desperately to avoid each other. You see it all the time, like on Twitter. You see people being added to block list. You find someone you don't agree with, so you add them to a list of people to be blocked, so that the people who are like-minded, people who are like you, can go there and find out who they need to block, so they can't ever see their tweets. They can't ever see their opinions. That is just absolutely ridiculous. And it doesn't need to be like that. Just instead of having fights, have discussions. That doesn't mean that you're going to change your own beliefs. And that's another thing. Why are people so afraid to have their beliefs challenged? I used to consider myself a Republican up until about 2012. And then that's when I started becoming more libertarian. And a lot of, some of it had to do with Ron Paul, but a lot of it had to do with, because Ron Paul ran for president in 2012. And I got to know about Ron Paul because he ran for president. But just seeing the way the Republican Party propped up Mitt Romney, the way that they treated Ron Paul, and just, to see the direction the GOP was going, where the mask was completely off with them, at least for me it was. You were seeing that the Republican Party does not support limited government. They do not support individual liberty. They're actually pro big government. They are very pro things that they say they are not. And that's why I'm no longer a Republican. And I haven't been a Republican since then. See, but where I'm going with this is that, it's okay to challenge your own beliefs. You might change those beliefs, but if you do, well, if the evidence that you find doesn't support the beliefs that you hold, and you change your beliefs because of the evidence that you find, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. No, instead, we have to be so tribal. Instead, we avoid anything that looks like dissent. So, I've talked about the extremism of the far left at this point, but this does not mean that I ignore the extremism that stems from the far right. Whenever James Alex Fields Jr. hit Heather Heyer with a car and killed her at that Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, I condemned that. Everyone should have condemned it. Anyone who try to excuse that act is no better than the people who are trying to excuse what happened to Andy Ngo. Also, waving Nazi flags makes you look like an idiot. And encouraging violence against those who disrespect the American flag is also a pretty bad look. So maybe you shouldn't do that. And then, of course, there are the people who support a white ethno-state. See, there are people in the extreme far right who also have their own share of problems. So, yeah, this isn't just an extreme far left thing. It's just an extreme thing in general. But please stop attacking people just because they don't agree with you. And please stop doxing people. This is getting ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous that you find someone with a different opinion from you, so you think you have to find their personal information and publish it on the internet for other people to see. Do people not understand how dangerous that is? There are people in this country who are psychotic. And if they were to get a hold of someone's private information, like where they live, that could be very bad. That could end very badly for the person who is being doxxed. You know, I said at the beginning of this episode that Ava Martinez and her family were doxxed all because she was mocking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So you are putting a 10-year-old child in danger all because she's making fun of a congressperson that you support. Oh, God forbid that anyone mocks your queen. Wow. You know, and there have been people talking about this, about how it might be wrong for her family to exploit her like that in the first place. And yeah, they kind of have a point, but that is a completely different argument. You know, some people have actually threatened a 10-year-old girl, and all because she dared to make fun of someone. First off, name a public figure who doesn't receive ridicule for any reason. Because if you have a problem with people mocking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but you don't have a problem with people mocking Donald Trump, you are a big part of the problem. Secondly, that's just part of being a public figure. Like, name any public figure who does not receive ridicule for any reason. And, you know, she's just a kid. People actually want to harass and intimidate a kid. That is disgusting. You know, people keep talking about a second civil war happening in America, and in my honest opinion, we are not anywhere close to that yet, because while you see what happened to Andy Ngo, and you've seen some other things happen, there are, you know, acts of violence taking place, but a large majority of this fighting happens on the internet. So I don't think that we are quite to a second civil war just yet. But if we continue down this road, then it's sure to happen at some point. Americans taking up arms against each other just because they disagree. You know, maybe one day the history books will describe a second American Revolution happening, and this one will actually involve airports. But that's all I have for this week's episode of the Political Circus Weekly Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And I did not point this out on last week's podcast. I want to reiterate that Think Liberty is on Patreon now. We have a Patreon. If you wish to become a patron, you can donate to our Patreon. If you enjoy this podcast, if you enjoy the other podcasts that are part of the Think Liberty Network, if you like the content that you find on our website, think-liberty.com, we ask that you please donate so we can continue to create even more of this content. So thank you so much for listening. The Political Circus Weekly Podcast will be back with another episode next week. However, it will not be done by me. I will be on vacation next week, taking some very much needed time off. William Gaston, who is the host of the Liberty Bites podcast on the Think Liberty Network, he has agreed to step in during my absence, so I want to extend a big thank you to him for agreeing to do that. And I know he is going to give you a great episode. If you haven't listened to Liberty Bites, check it out, because William does some great work. He will be doing this episode next week, and I am very I'm very certain that you will enjoy it. And you will hear from me again when I return. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back later.
And thing sucks!